Welcome to Billionaire Heart Stories, where hidden identities collide with poetic justice, and the true measure of wealth isn't what you own, but who you are when no one's watching. In a world obsessed with power and status, we tell stories about the kings who walk among us in disguise, the arrogant elite who mistake cruelty for strength, and the unexpected heroes whose kindness rewrites destinies. This is not just about money, this is about the billionaire heart. That rare collision of wealth and compassion, power and humility, justice and mercy, because sometimes the person you help in a storm isn't a stranger at all. They're your entire future. The windshield wipers were losing the battle. Maya Chen's knuckles had gone white around the steering wheel of her 2008 Honda Civic, the kind of white that came from gripping something when your entire world felt like it was slipping sideways. Rain hammered the glass in sheets so thick the road ahead dissolved into abstract smears of red taillights and yellow lane markers. The radio crackled with static, cutting in and out with fragments of a weather advisory she didn't need. She could feel the storm in her bones, in the way her shoulders tensed, in the accelerating drumbeat of her pulse. Tomorrow's the meeting. Tomorrow, Dalton decides who stays and who gets a pink slip with 2 weeks severance and a handshake that feels like a slap. The dashboard clock glowed 11:43 p.m. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder. A text from Mrs. Park, her neighbor. "Lily's asleep. Take your time." But time was the one luxury Maya couldn't afford. Not with an 11-year-old daughter whose school supplies she'd bought on a credit card already groaning under the weight of accumulated desperation. Not with a landlord who'd started leaving rent reminder notes in increasingly passive-aggressive fonts. Not with a job that paid $2. 13 an hour plus tips and the constant, gnawing anxiety that plus tips was a promise the universe might revoke at any moment. She should have taken the faster route through downtown Tacoma. But the I-5 southbound corridor at midnight was cheaper on gas, and Maya had learned to measure her life in those kinds of calculations. Pennies, minutes, the precise weight of every decision. That's when she saw him. Exit 137, the service road near Fife, that forgotten stretch of asphalt between somewhere and nowhere. And there, hunched beneath the skeletal shelter of an abandoned bus stop, was an old man. Lightning split the sky just for a second, but it was enough. Enough to see his white hair plastered to his skull, his dress shirt and slacks soaked through, his body curved protectively around something he clutched to his chest like it was the only solid thing left in the world. Maya's foot hovered over the gas pedal. "Keep driving. It's midnight. You're alone." This is exactly how episodes of Dateline start. But then the lightning flashed again, and she saw his face. Not threatening, not dangerous, just lost. The kind of loss that reminded her of the night Lily's father walked out, when Maya sat on the bathroom floor of her college apartment and realized she was 20 years old, pregnant, and more alone than she'd ever imagined possible. Somebody had stopped for her that night. Mrs. Park, actually her neighbor even back then, who'd heard her crying through the thin walls, and brought soup and toilet paper, and the kind of practical kindness that saves lives quietly. "Pay it forward," Mrs. Park had said. "Someday, when you can." Maya pulled over, hazard lights blinking, rain immediately soaking through her highway diner uniform the moment she opened the door, the cold biting through the polyester like teeth. "Sir?" She had to shout over the storm's roar. "Sir, are you okay?" The old man looked up, and his eyes were the color of rain-washed stone, watery but sharp, seeing her in a way that felt uncomfortably thorough. "My car," he said, voice fracturing around the edges. "It broke down 3 miles back. I've been walking." He was trembling. Not just from cold, but from something deeper. Exhaustion, maybe, or fear, or that particular species of desperation that comes from being invisible in a world that's forgotten how to see. Maya didn't hesitate. "Get in," she said, already moving to help him. "Come on, before you catch pneumonia." The leather briefcase in his arms was the only dry thing about him. He'd curved his entire body into a shield around it, protecting it from the storm, with the kind of fierce devotion usually reserved for children or sacred things. She didn't know it yet, but she was looking at both. The back room of Highway Diner number 23 smelled like industrial bleach and yesterday's French fry grease, a combination that had long since stopped registering to Maya's senses, but this morning it felt suffocating. 23 employees crammed into a space designed for inventory storage, shoulders pressed against metal shelving units stocked with industrial-sized ketchup bottles and napkin dispensables. The fluorescent lights hummed with that particular frequency that lived somewhere between annoying and migraine-inducing. Maya stood in the back row, her spine pressed against a rack of coffee filters, and tried to steady her breathing. 4 hours of sleep. That's all she'd managed after getting home at 1:17 a.m., after helping that old man, Harold. He'd said his name was Harold. After promising herself she'd done a good thing. Even though good things didn't pay rent, focus. Don't give Dalton any reason to put your name on that list. Richard Dalton arrived at exactly 9 a.m., Because men like Dalton understood that power lived in punctuality. He carried a leather portfolio that probably cost more than Maya made in a month. The kind of accessory that screamed, "I have an MBA, and you don't," without a single word being spoken. He was 42, but dressed like he was auditioning for a Fortune 500 board meeting. Tailored navy suit, silk tie with a Windsor knot so perfect it looked computer-generated. Shoes polished to a mirror shine that reflected the fluorescent lights like tiny accusations. His Wharton class ring caught the light as he set down his Starbucks cup, brought from outside, not from the diner's coffee pots, because God forbid Richard Dalton drink the same coffee as the people he managed. "Good morning, team," he said, and the word team landed like a lie everyone was too afraid to call out. Maya watched his fingers swipe across a tablet screen, manicured, soft. The hands of someone who'd never scrubbed a grill at 2 in the morning or burned their forearms, pulling pie, crusts from industrial ovens. "As you know," Dalton continued, voice smooth as oil and just as slippery, "this company has been underperforming in several key metrics. Labor costs are 17% above industry standard. Customer satisfaction scores have plateaued." And he paused, let the silence stretch like a noose. "And frankly, some of you simply aren't cutting it anymore." Don't react. Don't give him the satisfaction. But Maya's stomach was already churning, that familiar cocktail of fear and rage that tasted like copper on her tongue. She'd worked a double shift yesterday, covered for Denise when her daughter had that dentist appointment, smiled through a customer calling her sweetheart, while leaving a $3 tip on a $60 check. "I'll be implementing a performance-based restructuring," Dalton said, the corporate euphemism hanging in the air like sulfur. "Those of you who demonstrate value will stay. The rest," he shrugged, actually shrugged, like their mortgages and medical bills and children's school lunches, were minor clerical inconveniences. Then his eyes found Maya. "Speaking of underperformance," he said, and something in his tone made the room temperature drop 5 degrees. "Maya, your section had 3 customer complaints last week." Maya's head snapped up. "What? No, I checked the, Are you contradicting me?" Dalton's voice sharpened into a blade. "This is exactly the attitude problem I'm talking about. You've been here, 3 years? And you're still just a waitress." The emphasis on just hit like a slap. "Have you ever stopped to ask yourself why you haven't been promoted?" The room had gone silent, that awful complicit silence of people grateful the target wasn't them. Maya's voice came out quieter than she wanted. "I work hard. I'm always on time. I cover other people's shifts." "Working hard isn't the same as working smart," Dalton interrupted. "This isn't a charity. This is a business." He made a note on his tablet, the stylus making a soft scratching sound that felt obscenely loud. "We'll discuss your future here at your individual review, next Tuesday, 3 p.m. His smile was all teeth. "Don't be late." And before Maya could respond, before the humiliation could fully metastasize into something she'd have to carry home to Lily, the diner's front bell chimed. Through the doorway, they all saw him. An elderly man, slightly damp, carrying a worn leather briefcase. The same man Maya had pulled from the storm just 9 hours ago. Harold's eyes met hers across the distance. The smallest smile touched his lips. Then he said, loud enough for Dalton to hear, "I'm here to see the manager. Is Richard Dalton available?" Dalton's face went through a fascinating metamorphosis. Confusion flickering to dismissal, then freezing into something that looked uncomfortably like fear. The transformation took maybe 3 seconds, but Maya watched it happen in slow motion, the way you watch a building collapse from a safe distance knowing the shockwave is coming. "I'm sorry, who?" Dalton's voice had lost its corporate smoothness. "I think you're confused, sir. The company founder is standing right in front of you," Harold interrupted. The briefcase Maya had watched him protect through the storm opened with 2 decisive clicks. From inside, Harold produced a laminated corporate directory, the kind printed on heavy cardstock that screamed official documentation. He flipped to the executive page with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this before, turned it to face Dalton. There was Harold's photograph, 20 years younger but unmistakable, the same gray-blue eyes, the same set to his jaw. Below it, Harold R. Mitchell, founder and principal shareholder, 72%. The air in the diner had changed. If earlier it smelled like coffee and maple syrup, now it smelled like the moment before lightning strikes. Ozone and electricity and the charged particles of someone's world ending. "This is..." Dalton's hand went to his tie, adjusting what was already perfect. A nervous tell. Maya filed it away. "I don't understand. Why would you..." "Go undercover?" Harold's voice was quiet, lethally quiet. "Because numbers on a spreadsheet don't tell you what kind of people run your company. But a storm-soaked night and a broken-down car," he paused, "that tells you everything." Maya stood frozen by the storage room doorway, invisible. A ghost at her own vindication. Her mind was struggling to reconcile 2 incompatible realities. The frail old man she'd helped into her passenger seat And this figure, who commanded the room like gravity, had reorganized itself around him. He owns everything, the building, the job, the future Dalton was about to take away. Harold opened a laptop, the one from the briefcase, Maya recognized it now, and turned it to face Dalton. On the screen, spreadsheets, highlighted vendor contracts, bank transfers mapped out like evidence at a crime scene. Northwest Logistics Supply, Harold said, finger tracing down a column of numbers. They've been charging us 37% above market rate for 6 months. I made some calls. That company doesn't exist. The bank account receiving payments? He looked up. Registered to an LLC owned by your wife's maiden name. Creative. Dalton's hands had started trembling. Actual trembling. The kind you can't control when your nervous system realizes the game is over. You can't prove. Evergreen Cleaning Services. Another ghost company. Same ownership structure. Harold's voice never rose. Never needed to. $47,000 a month through fake vendors. And then there's the matter of the efficiency review. A second document appeared. Internal emails, Dalton's name in the sender field. Maya saw her own name highlighted in yellow like a target. You recommended 9 specific employees for termination. Harold read. 5 single mothers, including Maya, 2 employees over 55, 1 veteran with PTSD, 1 line cook who filed a harassment complaint against you last month. The diner had gone completely silent. Even the kitchen sounds had stopped. Denise stood in the doorway, spatula still in hand, mouth open. Hector, the dishwasher, had emerged from the back, frozen mid-step. The 3 customers at the counter had stopped eating, forks suspended in midair like the world had paused. You weren't cutting costs, Harold said, and now his voice carried the weight of genuine disgust. You were eliminating anyone who threatened your authority or reminded you of whatever demons you're running from. Dalton tried one final play, desperation making him stupid. Mr. Mitchell, I can explain. These are misunderstandings. I've increased revenue by 12% since, by cutting staff hours so severely that people like Maya work double shifts just to survive. Harold interrupted. He stood, and despite being half a foot shorter than Dalton, he suddenly seemed to tower. You've treated human beings like line items on a budget sheet. Then Harold turned to Maya, really looked at her, and she felt seen in a way that made her throat tight. This woman, who makes $2, 13, an hour plus tips, who's raising a child alone, who probably has $30 in her bank account right now. 27, Maya thought distantly, $27.16. She saw an old man in a storm and didn't hesitate, didn't calculate the risk, just stopped her car and helped. Harold turned back to Dalton. You make $87,000 a year, plus bonuses, and you can't see past your own reflection. Security guards appeared at the door. Harold must have called them before entering. Dalton was escorted out, still protesting, his voice fading as the door swung shut. Then Harold looked at Maya. Table 7, he said. We need to talk. The office behind Highway Diner number 23 was barely large enough to qualify as an office. More like a converted storage closet with delusions of grandeur. Saturday morning light filtered through a single window, so grimy it turned sunshine into something gray and tired. The space smelled like old paper, scorched coffee, and the particular mustiness of file boxes that had been stacked in corners for years, slowly fossilizing into permanent fixtures. Maya arrived at 7 a.m. wearing her nicest clothes. A blouse from Target that she'd ironed twice and slacks that had seen her through 3 parent-teacher conferences and 1 disastrous job interview at a bank 2 years ago. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking as she pushed open the door. This is a mistake. You're going to walk in there, and he's going to realize he made a terrible decision. You're a waitress with an unfinished degree and a daughter who needs you to be more than you are. But Harold was already there, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, reading glasses perched on his nose, surrounded by ledgers and spreadsheets like a general surveying a battlefield. Coffee? He gestured to a fresh pot. And the normalcy of the offer made something in Maya's chest unclench slightly. Mitchell, I have to be honest with you. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. I don't have a degree. I'm not qualified for this. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but... You stopped in a storm for a stranger, Harold interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. You work doubles without complaint. You notice when the register's short and report it, instead of pocketing the difference. You remember every regular customer's name and their usual order. He removed his glasses, looked at her directly. That's not something you learn in business school, Maya. That's character. Character doesn't pay bills, she wanted to say. Character doesn't make you qualified to run a company. But she didn't. Instead, she poured coffee and sat down across from him, and something that felt dangerously like hope began to take root in her chest. By Wednesday, that hope had transformed into something sharper, focus. The dormant parts of her brain, the parts that used to light up during her statistics classes, during late-night study sessions when she'd been convinced she'd graduate summa cum laude and conquer the business world, those parts were waking up. "Look at this," Maya said, pulling up 3 months of inventory records on Harold's laptop. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with increasing confidence, muscle memory, from a life she'd abandoned, returning like a language she'd never actually forgotten. The Olympia location reported throwing out 47 pounds of ground beef on August 12th, but their purchase orders show they only received 30 pounds that week. Harold leaned in, and she could smell his aftershave. Something old-fashioned, like her grandfather used to wear, cedar and leather. "The math doesn't work," Maya continued. "It's everywhere, Everett, Bellingham. They're all showing impossible waste numbers. Someone's been creating phantom inventory and selling it." She turned to face him. "If I'm right, we're talking another $22,000 a month in theft." Keep going," Harold said, and the pride in his voice made her feel 10 feet tall. That's when he showed her the photograph. A little boy at a piano recital, maybe 6 years old, gap-toothed smile, holding a first-place ribbon like it was a trophy for winning the Olympics. The joy radiating from that small face was almost painful to look at. "My son," Harold said quietly. "Evan." He was so proud of himself. "Was?" Maya asked carefully, because she'd heard the past tense, heard the weight behind it. "Is," Harold corrected, but pain flickered across his weathered face like lightning. "We haven't spoken in 8 years. I tried to force him into a mold he was never meant to fit. Told him music was a hobby, not a future." His thumb traced the edge of the photograph. "Last thing I said to him was that he wasn't my son if he walked away." Maya thought of Lily, of all the ways she tried to give her daughter freedom while keeping her safe. The impossible mathematics of parenthood. "Have you tried calling?" she asked. "Every year on his birthday. He changed his number." Harold smiled, and it was the saddest thing Maya had ever seen. "But I hear him play sometimes. He sends recordings. Doesn't know I know it's him, but I recognize his touch on the keys." The next evening, Maya was working late. Lily at a sleepover, the office quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator units in the kitchen beyond. She was cross-referencing vendor invoices when she saw it. Northwest Logistics Supply, a payment authorization from last week. After Dalton was fired, someone else had access. Someone was still stealing. Maya grabbed her phone, fingers hovering over Harold's number when she heard it. Footsteps. In the darkened diner, the front door, which should be locked, creaking open. She quietly closed his office door, locked it, ducked behind the desk. Through the crack underneath, she watched a flashlight beam sweep across the diner floor. Moving closer, the doorknob rattled. A voice, muffled, male. "I know someone's in there. I can see the light under the door." Maya's heart was a jackhammer against her ribcage. Each beat so violent she was certain whoever stood on the other side of that door could hear it. The office had become a trap. 4 walls and a locked door, and her own stupidity for staying late, for thinking she was safe in a building she'd worked in for 3 years. 911. Dial 911. Do it now. But her thumb hovered frozen over the screen, because the moment she made that call, the moment she spoke, he'd know exactly where she was. The light from her phone cast grotesque shadows across the cramped office, turning file boxes into crouching figures, the coat rack into something with reaching arms. Through the crack beneath the door, the flashlight beam swept methodically, left to right, pausing at each booth. The footsteps were deliberate, unhurried. Someone who knew the layout, who'd been here before. Think. There's a back exit through the kitchen, but you'd have to open this door to get to it. The window's painted shut, hasn't been opened in years. You're boxed in. Maya's mind raced through self-defense scenarios she'd half-absorbed from YouTube videos watched at 2 a.m. During Lily's colicky infant months, keys between the knuckles, aim for the eyes, scream loud, scream constant, make yourself too much trouble to be worth it. She gripped her phone tighter, willing her hand to stop shaking long enough to dial. The doorknob rattled again, tested, firmly. Then the voice. "Maya, it's me, it's okay." The relief that flooded through her was so intense it felt like pain. She recognized that voice a half second before her nervous system could catch up with her brain. Harold. She unlocked the door with trembling fingers, yanked it open. Harold stood there in clothes she'd never seen him wear. Jeans and a cardigan. The kind of casual Friday outfit that made him look grandfatherly instead of imperial. He held his phone with the flashlight on, not an actual flashlight, and the prosaic detail of it made Maya want to laugh or cry, or both. "Jesus," she breathed. "You scared me." I saw the office light from the parking lot," Harold explained, stepping inside. His eyes scanned her face, cataloging the fear she was still shaking off. "Thought we might have an actual break-in." "What are you still doing here at—" He checked his watch. "Nearly 11 at night? Look at this." Maya turned the laptop toward him, pointing at the impossible payment authorization. Someone's still accessing the accounts. This was processed 3 days ago. Harold's expression darkened in a way that reminded Maya he hadn't built a multi-million-dollar company by being soft. He pulled out his phone, dialed. Tom, Harold Mitchell. I need you to freeze all vendor payment authorizations immediately. Corporate override code Mitchell-1978. Yes, all of them. I'll explain in the morning. They spent the next hour buried in security logs, Harold's reading glasses sliding down his nose as he cross-referenced access times with employee schedules. The picture that emerged was damning in its clarity. Kyle Brennan, assistant manager, 28 years old, with too much cologne and a smile that never reached his eyes. Dalton had given him partial system access, a junior partner getting 20% of the take. We need to call the police, Maya said. We will, but first we need ironclad evidence. Harold opened a new document, began typing. Tomorrow, you're going to ask Kyle to help you process vendor payments. Tell him you're new to the system and need guidance. We'll record everything. While they waited for Harold's lawyer to call back with next steps, the conversation shifted, drifted. It was late. They were exhausted, and exhaustion had a way of making the walls come down. Can I ask you something? Maya said. Why me, for the manager position? You could have brought in someone from corporate, someone with experience. Harold was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old grief. When my Catherine got sick, we fought about treatment options. I wanted aggressive chemo, clinical trials, anything to buy more time. She wanted palliative care. Wanted to spend her last months comfortable and present with Evan. He removed his glasses, rubbed his eyes. I bullied her into the treatments. She suffered through 8 more months of hell, and I told myself it was love. But it was fear, my need to control. Harold, with Evan I did the same thing. Loved him so much I tried to control every part of his future, and he left. He looked at her, and his eyes were ancient. When I saw you stop your car in that storm, a woman who has every reason to protect herself first, who has a child depending on her, you still stopped. You led with kindness instead of fear. That's the kind of person I want running my company. Not someone who knows accounting. Someone who knows people. The next afternoon, Maya had no choice but to bring Lily to the diner. Mrs. Park had the flu, and 11-year-olds couldn't be left home alone. Not legally, not morally, not in any universe where Maya was trying to be a good mother. Lily settled into a corner booth with her worn copy of The Hobbit, and when Harold noticed her, something in his expression softened in a way that made Maya's throat tight. Who's this? He asked. My daughter, Lily. Lily, this is Mr. Mitchell. He's my boss. Lily looked up, assessing this elderly man with brutal childhood honesty. You're the one who made my mom cry happy last week? For 20 minutes, while Maya prepped for the afternoon rush, Harold and Lily discussed dragons and riddles and whether Gollum deserved sympathy. Maya watched from the kitchen window, and her heart did something complicated in her chest, something that felt like grief for the grandfather Lily never had, and gratitude for this unexpected gift. At 3 p.m., Maya executed the sting. Kyle was eager to show off his knowledge, didn't notice the phone recording in her pocket. See, you just enter the vendor code here, Kyle explained, clones suffocating in the small office. And if you ever need to create a new vendor, that's here. But don't tell anyone I showed you. That night, as Maya walked to her car, Harold beside her, he swayed suddenly, gripped the car door. His face had gone the color of old paper. Harold, Maya's voice spiked with alarm. I'm fine, he said, but his breathing was labored, wrong. Just dizzy. He collapsed. Harold went down hard, his knees buckling like someone had cut the strings holding him upright. Maya lunged, caught him under the arms before his head could crack against the Civic's bumper, and the weight of him, so much heavier than he looked, dead weight, oh God, please don't let that be literal, sent them both to the asphalt. Help! The scream tore out of Maya's throat. Someone call 911. Denise burst through the diner's door, phone already in hand, her chef's apron still tied around her waist. Behind her, Hector, the dishwasher, came running with the first aid kit they kept above the fryer. Maya's hands were shaking as she pressed 2 fingers to Harold's neck, searching for a pulse. There. Faint. Irregular, like Morse code transmitted through failing equipment. His lips were turning blue. That particular shade of blue that screamed oxygen deprivation and cardiac event and all the medical terminology Maya had learned from late-night hospital dramas that suddenly felt horrifically, practically relevant. Is he breathing? Hector dropped to his knees beside them. Barely. Maya tilted Harold's head back, checked his airway. Those CPR classes she'd taken when Lily was a baby, required for daycare enrollment, taken on a Saturday morning when she was so exhausted she'd nearly fallen asleep during the demonstration, came flooding back. Stay with me, Harold. Come on, stay with me. Harold's eyes fluttered open, unfocused, glassy, but conscious enough to see her. His hand reached up, grabbed Maya's wrist with surprising strength for a man whose heart was failing. "Evan," he whispered. The word came out wet, desperate. "Find Evan." "Tell him—" A spasm of pain cut him off, his back arching, fingers tightening around her wrist hard enough to bruise. "Don't talk. Save your strength." "The ambulance is coming." Maya's voice cracked. She could hear sirens in the distance. That particular wail, that meant help was close, but not close enough. Never close enough. But Harold wouldn't let go. His grip was iron, anchoring her. The letter. "In my hotel room. Crestview Inn, room 237. Under the mattress. For Evan." Each word cost him something. "Promise me." "I promise. I promise. But you're going to be fine. You're—" Harold's eyes rolled back. His hand went limp, sliding from her wrist to fall against the wet pavement. The paramedics arrived at 12:31 p.m. Maya would remember that timestamp forever. The way trauma burns certain details into your brain with perfect clarity while everything else dissolves into chaos. They worked with terrifying efficiency. Oxygen mask, IV line, portable EKG showing a rhythm that made them exchange looks that said everything they didn't. "Are you family?" one asked as they loaded Harold onto the gurney. Maya faltered. What was she? Employee felt too small. Friend felt presumptuous. "I'm the closest thing he's got right now." Then you're riding with us." Tacoma General's emergency department was a fluorescent-lit purgatory of beeping machines and controlled chaos. They wheeled Harold straight into a trauma bay, and Maya was relegated to the waiting room with its plastic chairs and years-old magazines and the particular smell of institutional disinfectant that couldn't quite mask human fear. She made calls. Corporate office, Harold's lawyer, the Crestview Inn, where she bribed the desk clerk with $300 she didn't have to let her into room 237. The letter was exactly where he'd said. Thick envelope. For Evan Mitchell, written in handwriting that shook across the paper like seismograph readings. Hours blended together. Denise brought coffee and clean clothes. Lily was with Mrs. Park, blessedly unaware that the old man who'd talked to her about hobbits was dying 2 miles away. At 3:47 p.m., Dr. Patel approached, young, exhausted, her face telling Maya everything before words could form. "Ms. Chen," Mitchell suffered a massive myocardial infarction. "We did everything we could, but the damage was extensive. His heart is failing." A pause. "He's asked to speak with you. 10 minutes, maybe 15. The ICU was dim, quiet except for monitors beeping their mechanical lullabies. Harold looked impossibly small among the tubes and wires, as if the machines were slowly erasing him. "Maya," his voice was thread-thin. "I'm here." She took his hand, careful of the IV. "I got the letter. I'll find Evan, I swear." "Tell him," Harold's breathing labored, "tell him I loved him more than breathing, just loved him wrong." At 4:17 p.m., the monitor's beeping became a single sustained tone, and Harold Mitchell slipped away. The drive from Tacoma to Portland was 147 miles of Maya's mind spinning in circles, practicing speeches she'd discard before the next exit sign. I-5 South stretched ahead like a gray ribbon through evergreen forests and strip mall suburbs, the landscape blurring into white noise, while her thoughts screamed. How do you tell a stranger their father is dead? How do you hand someone grief wrapped in an envelope and expect them to thank you for it? Lily sat in the back seat with her Kindle and headphones, 11 years old and adaptable in the way children of single mothers learn to be. Around mile 90, she pulled out one earbud. "Mom, are you okay?" Maya's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Yeah, baby, just thinking." About Mr. Mitchell's son. The fact that Lily understood, that she'd absorbed the weight of this errand without needing explanation, made Maya's throat close. About how to give him something from his dad. Is the son sad? He's about to be. The Blue Note occupied a basement space in Portland's Pearl District, the kind of venue that wore its authenticity like armor against the neighborhood's creeping gentrification. Exposed brick walls sweating with decades of moisture. Amber lighting so dim it felt like diving underwater. The ghost of 1,000 cigarettes had soaked into the walls despite Oregon's smoking ban, mixing with spilled beer and the particular musk of a room where people came to forget themselves in music. Maya and Lily killed time at Powell's Books until 8:45 p.m., then stood outside the club as dusk settled over the city like a bruise. A chalkboard sign on the sidewalk read, "Tonight, Evan Mitchell, piano, $10 cover, 2-drink minimum." The bartender, name tag reading Sam, sleeve tattoos and kind eyes, took one look at Lily and said, "Kid can sit at the bar with a Shirley Temple on the house, long as she's with you." Evan Mitchell took the stage at 9:07 p.m., and Maya understood immediately why Harold had kept every recording. He was 35, tall and lean in dark jeans and a worn button-down. Sleeves rolled to the elbows in a way that suggested function over style. His hair was dark, like Harold's had been, pulled into a small bun that would have looked pretentious on anyone else but on him just looked practical. He had his father's eyes, that same gray-blue that seemed to see through surfaces into the architecture beneath. But where Harold's hands had shaken with age, Evan's were steady and sure on the keys. He didn't announce songs, didn't talk between pieces, just played Coltrane, Monk, Ellington, and then originals that felt like conversations between hope and grief, like someone arguing with God in a language that bypassed words entirely. Maya watched his face as he played, the way he closed his eyes during the hard passages, the way his shoulders relaxed into the music like it was the only place in the world he could breathe, without counting the cost. The set ended at 10:15 p.m., scattered applause from maybe 40 patrons. Evan nodded, almost shy, and retreated to the bar for whiskey, neat. Maya could leave, mail the letter, spare him the agony of receiving news like this from a stranger in a bar. But Harold asked you to find him, to tell him, and you keep your promises. She left Lily at a table with strict instructions not to move, then crossed the room on unsteady legs. Evan Mitchell? He turned, wary the way artists are when approached after shows. Yeah? My name is Maya Chen. I worked for your father. Her voice cracked despite preparation. I need to talk to you. The wariness shifted to something harder. I don't have a father. He died 3 days ago. The words landed like stones. And his last words were about you. Evan's face went blank, not emotionless, overloaded. The whiskey glass in his hand trembled. What? Can we sit down, please? They moved to a corner booth. Maya pulled the letter from her purse, set it on the scarred table between them like evidence. He wanted you to have this, made me promise to find you. Evan stared at the envelope, his name in his father's handwriting, like it might detonate. How did he... Was it sudden? Heart attack. He collapsed at the diner. I was with him when he... Maya's throat closed around the memory of that sustained tone, that final exhale. He talked about you every day we worked together. He was so proud of you, Evan. He listened to your recordings. He followed your career. He what? Evan's head snapped up. The anonymous recordings you sent to corporate. Every year on his birthday. He knew they were from you. He listened to every single one. Evan's eyes were wet. I thought he'd deleted them, thrown them away. It wasn't stupid. It was a bridge, the only one either of you knew how to build. Evan slid the letter back across the table, stood. I can't read this. Not now, maybe not ever. Maya saw him preparing to run, the same way he'd run 8 years ago when the walls closed in. He said he loved you more than breathing, she blurted. He said he just loved you wrong. Evan froze. He said you played with your heart on the outside, and he spent 8 years wishing he'd protected that instead of trying to change it. Evan's shoulders shook. He sat back down, buried his face in his hands, and for a long moment, the only sound was his ragged breathing. Then slowly, he reached for the letter. Sunday morning arrived with the particular gray light that Seattle does best. Not quite raining, not quite clear, just a persistent dampness that settled into your bones like regret. Maya sat across from Thomas Brennan in his downtown office, 42nd floor of the Columbia Center, and tried not to feel like an imposter in her Target blazer surrounded by mahogany and leather and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. Ms. Chen, Harold left very specific instructions, and Thomas slid a folder across his desk, the kind of expensive legal portfolio that probably cost more than Maya's monthly rent. You're named as executor of his personal estate. The coffee cup paused halfway to Maya's mouth. I'm sorry, what? The business holdings go into a trust with stipulations I'll explain shortly. But his personal effects, his wishes for the funeral, the disposition of his residence, and he's entrusted those to you. But Evan will inherit according to the trust once he meets certain conditions. Harold was... Thomas chose his words carefully. Strategic. Maya took the folder with shaking hands. Inside, funeral arrangements for Wednesday 2 p.m., Lakewood Memorial. And beneath that, 2 handwritten pages that started, if you're reading this, I finally ran out of time to say the things I should have said while I had the chance. Harold had written his own eulogy. Of course he did, Maya thought. Control freak to the end. But reading his words about building legacies and the importance of kindness over profit, margins, made her eyes burn in Thomas Brennan's expensive office with its view of the water and its implicit assumption that grief should be conducted professionally, quietly, without making a scene. 147 miles south, in a studio apartment above a Vietnamese restaurant in Portland, Evan Mitchell circled the letter like it was a wild animal. The apartment smelled perpetually of pho, star anise and beef broth and cilantro. a scent that had long since stopped registering but now felt suffocating. The letter sat on his kitchen table, thick, cream-colored envelope with his name in handwriting he'd recognize anywhere. His father's fountain pen script, shakier than Evan remembered but unmistakable. He made tea, let it go cold, played piano for 3 hours. Angry, discordant jazz that made his downstairs neighbor pound on the ceiling. Took a shower, stared at the envelope some more. You don't have to read it, he told himself. You could burn it, throw it away. You don't owe him anything. But that was a lie, wasn't it? He owed Harold everything. His life, his talent, the very fingers that could coax emotion from ivory keys. Even the anger was a debt, because you can't hate someone who never mattered. Sunday became Monday. Monday bled into Tuesday. The letter remained unopened. Finally, at 2:37 a.m. Wednesday morning, technically the day of the funeral, Evan picked up the envelope. His hands were steadier than he expected. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind Harold always used for important documents. He broke the seal. 4 pages, fountain pen. The handwriting shook across the lines like seismograph readings, and Evan could see where his father had stopped, started again, pushed through. My dear Evan. Evan read about the storm, about Maya's kindness, about Harold's failing heart that had been failing long before medicine could name it. He read about being 6 years old at his mother's piano, about having the gift, and how Harold had feared it instead of honoring it. I feared you'd starve as a musician. I feared you'd struggle. I feared you'd hate me for not protecting you from a hard life. So I tried to force you into my mold, tried to make you safe by making you like me. Evan's vision blurred. What I didn't understand, what took me 8 years and your mother's death and a stranger's kindness in a rainstorm to finally comprehend, is that you were never meant to be safe. Artists aren't safe. They're brave in ways I could never be. The letter fell from Evan's hands. He sat on his kitchen floor, cheap linoleum, a crack running through the grout he'd been meaning to fix for months, and cried. Huge, ugly, cathartic sobs that emptied out 8 years of rage and grief and love that had nowhere to go. He cried for the father he'd loved and the father he'd hated, in the revelation that they were the same person, just a man who loved wrong but meant right. At dawn, he called Maya. I'll be at the funeral, he said, voice wrecked. And after, we need to talk about the company, about what happens next. Wednesday morning, Evan put on the dark suit he hadn't worn since his mother's funeral, tucked Harold's letter into his inner pocket over his heart, and drove north toward a reckoning he'd been avoiding for 8 years. Lakewood Memorial Cemetery occupied 5 acres of hillside overlooking Tacoma, the kind of place where the dead got better views than most of the living. Autumn had turned the maples into flags of gold and crimson, leaves falling in slow spirals that caught the afternoon light. Mount Rainier loomed in the distance, snow-capped and eternal, indifferent to the small human dramas playing out in its shadow. Maya stood near the gravesite at 1:47 p.m. and tried to process the impossible crowd. She'd expected maybe 20 people, some corporate executives fulfilling obligation, a handful of employees paying respects. Instead, there were over 200. Waitresses from every highway diner location, many with tears tracking through carefully applied makeup, cooks in their best clothes, the kind of Sunday suits that lived in closets for weddings and funerals, dishwashers and busboys and delivery drivers who'd driven hours to be here, the mayor of Tacoma, the CEO of a local food bank, families with children who whispered and pointed at the casket with the innocent curiosity of those too young to understand permanence. Harold quietly funded scholarships for employees' children, Thomas the lawyer explained, appearing at Maya's elbow. Paid off medical debts, kept the Olympia location open for 3 years at a loss because shutting it down would have devastated that neighborhood. Why didn't you tell anyone? Maya wanted to ask the casket. Why hide all that goodness like it was something to be ashamed of? Movement at the cemetery entrance caught her eye. Evan Mitchell arrived at 1:47 p.m., 13 minutes before the service would start, because even in grief, some people couldn't help being punctual. He was a ghost, in an expensive suit, hollow-eyed and moving through the crowd like he was underwater, like the air had different density for him than everyone else. Their eyes met across the gathered mourners. Something silent passed between them. Not quite understanding, but recognition. They were both here because Harold had left pieces of himself lodged in their chests like shrapnel, and now they had to figure out how to live with the weight. Evan sat in the front row. Maya beside him, Lily on her other side in her Sunday best, small hand gripping her mother's with fierce protectiveness. When it was time, Maya walked to the podium on legs that felt borrowed. She unfolded Harold's handwritten eulogy, and her voice cracked on the first line, but steadied as muscle memory from 3 years of calling orders. Across a noisy diner kicked in. If you're reading this, I finally ran out of time to say the things I should have said while I had the chance. She read his words about building businesses versus building legacies, about kindness over profit margins, about how the best investment he ever made was trusting people instead of controlling them. I made a lot of mistakes, Maya read, feeling Evan tense beside her. But my biggest was thinking that success was measured in dollars instead of dignity. In the end, the only thing that matters is how many people you helped when you had the power to hurt them instead. The final paragraph addressed everyone gathered. If you're at my funeral, know this: you mattered to me. Whether you scrambled eggs at my diner or sat in my boardroom, whether I knew your name or never spoke to you, you mattered. And the only way to honor me is to matter to someone else. Help a stranger, stop in a storm. Be the person someone remembers when they're writing their own eulogy. Maya's voice broke on the last line. Don't mourn me, just be better than I was. That's all the legacy anyone needs. After the casket was lowered, after the crowd dispersed, only 3 remained. Evan knelt beside the fresh grave and pulled Harold's letter from his pocket. He read aloud the final paragraph, voice raw. Tell your mother I'm sorry I took so long to understand. Tell yourself that you don't have to forgive me. He set the letter on the headstone, weighted with a smooth stone. I forgive you, Dad, he whispered. I'm so angry at you for dying before we could fix this, but I forgive you. Lily approached, held out a paper crane she'd folded during the service. Mr. Mitchell liked birds, she said solemnly. Evan looked at this child he'd never met and smiled through tears. Yeah, he did. As they walked toward the parking lot, Evan said, The lawyer told me about the trust, the 51-49 split. I know it's complicated. I want to do it, Evan interrupted. Not because of the money, because my dad spent his last days working with you. He chose you. And he was a lot of things, but he wasn't wrong about people. They sat on a bench, read through Harold's vision together. Transform the chain into ethical business, profit sharing, community programs. There's something I want to do, Evan said. Free meals during storms. Anyone who comes in, no questions asked. Maya's eyes filled. Storm kindness. As they shook hands on the partnership, Thomas approached with one final envelope. Harold recorded a video message, requested it be played for you both after the funeral, and when he handed them a tablet. Evan pressed play. Harold's face filled the screen, and his final words changed everything. Harold's face on the tablet screen looked tired but peaceful, filmed in that Crestview Inn motel room, with the leather briefcase, visible in the background, like a prop from his own life story. The timestamp read October 13th, 6:47 a.m., the morning after the storm, hours before he'd walk into the diner and fire Dalton, mere hours after Maya had saved him. Hello, Maya. Hello, Evan. His voice carried that particular quality of someone who knows they're speaking to ghosts, not the dead, but the living who exist in an unknowable future. If you're watching this together, it means you didn't run away from what I'm asking you to do. Thank you for that. Evan's hand found Maya's on the bench between them. Neither acknowledged it, but neither pulled away. Maya, you showed me that kindness isn't weakness. It's the only strength that matters. Evan, you showed me that love doesn't have to look the way I thought it did. Harold paused, emotion crossing his weathered face. Together, you're going to build something I never could, a business with a soul. The video ended with Harold's final directive. Transform the diners. Make them places where people matter more than profit. And remember, every stranger in a storm is someone's father, someone's son, someone's whole world. Treat them that way. The screen went black. Maya and Evan sat in silence, the weight of inheritance settling over them like a mantle. I love you both, Harold's voice echoed in their memories. Build something beautiful. So they did. The first board meeting on day 30 was a battlefield. Conference room full of skeptical executives who saw a waitress and a musician and smelled disaster. But Evan spoke first, surprising everyone, including himself. My father built this company on a simple idea: that everyone deserves dignity. We're going back to that foundation. Maya presented the numbers, how profit sharing would increase retention, how community programs would build brand loyalty, how ethical business was long-term profitable. By meeting's end, they'd won over half the board. The other half resigned within a week, and honestly, good riddance. The first storm, after Storm Kindness launched, was a December blizzard that turned I-5 into a parking lot and knocked out power across 3 counties. Maya sent the memo to all 68 locations. Extended hours, free hot meals, no questions asked. Tacoma Highway Diner number 23 served 147 people that night, families who'd lost power, homeless folks seeking warmth, a single mother with 2 kids whose car had broken down on the same stretch of road where Harold once stood in the rain. Denise, promoted to head chef, worked the grill until 2 a.m. Harold would have loved this, she told Maya, eyes shining. The story went viral. Local news, then national. Billionaire's legacy. Diners offer storm kindness. The PR value was incalculable, but more importantly, it was right in a way that had nothing to do with profit margins. On the anniversary of Harold's death, they unveiled the founder's seat, one booth in every location marked with a brass plaque, reserved for kindness, on free meals for anyone going through hard times. Full menu, full service, absolute dignity. Employees were trained. If someone sits in the founder's seat, treat them like they own the place, because in the ways that matter, they do. Somewhere in year 2, Maya and Evan stopped being just business partners. It happened gradually, imperceptibly. The way tectonic plates shift, sudden earthquakes built on years of pressure, a late night reviewing expansion plans when Evan said, "I'm glad my dad was wrong about everything except you." Maya looked up from her laptop. What? He was wrong about forcing me into business, wrong about how to show love, wrong about a lot of things. Evan met her eyes. But he was right about you. You're exactly who this company needed. We're exactly who it needed, Maya corrected. And something in the air between them shifted, settled, clicked into place like a combination lock finding its sequence. They married quietly the following spring in the original Highway Diner Harold had opened in 1978. Denise catered. Lily was maid of honor. The ceremony lasted 12 minutes, and it was perfect. Now, 3 years and 2 weeks after Harold's death, Maya and Evan stood at his grave with their 18-month-old son between them, Harold Evan Chin Mitchell, named after the grandfather who'd brought his parents together through one act of kindness in a storm. Little Harold dropped his toy piano on the grave, and it played a tinny electronic melody. The adults laughed through tears. As they walked back to the car, hand in hand, their son between them, Maya stopped, looked back at the headstone where fresh flowers bloomed, left by employees who still remembered, who still cared. "What is it?" Evan asked. "I was just thinking about that night, if I had driven past him." But you didn't," Evan said gently. "You stopped, and everything changed. Because sometimes a storm doesn't come to drown us. It comes to wash away the lies and bring us back to what really matters. A small thought to sit with. There's an old saying, we judge ourselves by our intentions, but we judge others by their actions." Harold Mitchell spent 8 years judging himself by what he meant to do, reconcile with his son, build a company with heart, become the man his wife believed he could be. But intentions are invisible. They live only in our heads, in our private conversations with God, or fate, or the mirror at 3 in the morning. What changed everything for Harold wasn't finally having good intentions. It was acting on them, disguising himself to understand his employees, stopping the layoffs, trusting Maya, not because she had credentials, but because she had character. And Maya, she didn't stop in that storm because she thought it would change her life. She stopped because it was right. Because somewhere along the way, someone had stopped for her. And kindness is a language that only works when we speak it out loud. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The world doesn't care what you meant to do. It only remembers what you did. That apology you've been rehearsing, send it. That person you've been meaning to help them. That bridge you've been planning to rebuild, start building. Because Harold Mitchell died with a letter in his briefcase that said everything he should have said, while his son could still hear it from his living voice. And while that letter eventually healed the wound, imagine how different the story would have been if Harold had sent it 8 years earlier. Your move is today, not tomorrow, not when you're ready, today. Because storms don't wait for perfect timing. They just come. And the only question that matters is, when they do, will you stop? Fictional disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction, created for entertainment and inspiration purposes. While inspired by universal themes of redemption, family reconciliation, and the transformative power of kindness, the characters, businesses, events, and locations depicted are entirely fictional. Highway Diner is a fictional restaurant chain. Harold Mitchell, Maya Chen, Evan Mitchell, Richard Dalton, and all other characters are fictional creations. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. The Storm Kindness program, while inspired by real acts of corporate philanthropy, is a fictional initiative created for this narrative. The message is real, the story is fiction. We create these stories to remind you that kindness, dignity, and second chances are universal truths worth celebrating, even when wrapped in fictional storytelling. If this story moved you, we encourage you to create your own storm kindness moment in the real world. Help a stranger. Stop when others drive past. Be the person someone remembers years later. That part doesn't have to be fiction.